Okay, here's a quick video of me draining the oil. I say quick because I don't want to drop anything. So I've got this sort of flexible oil funnel thing that you can buy off eBay. It's a bit of a rip-off. It's basically a piece of card covered in plastic, but it works well because you've got to try and get, the oil drain from the tank is like under there and it falls straight onto the brake pedal and stuff. So this is good because you can bend it and get there. And then I drain it straight into my sort of oil can. And the thing about these oil cans is they're fantastic, and I don't think you can buy them anymore. They're designed for cars, really. They've got like little wheels on the back, and you can like run them under the car and then drain straight into it. And then there's a big like cap goes on it, and then you can take it to the oil dump. But I haven't seen them for sale for a while, but which is crazy. I think they're fantastic. Anyway, that's the main, because draining the, whoever thought of putting the oil drain plug there, does want shooting really, because the oil just drains straight down and goes all over the frame and everything if you're not careful. I've sort of wedged mine up with a spanner to try and hold it up against the bottom of the tank, and I've got the my oil drain teetering on the edge of the bike lifter, which I'm rather worried about, because obviously if that does decide to overbalance, then I'm in trouble, so I'm kind of guarding it. But anyway, doing that, and then I'm going to drain the oil from the primary side. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to drain the oil from the sump, because to do that I need to get the exhaust off. Because what I've got is I've actually got a sump plate which has got a drain plug built in, which you can buy from companies like LP Williams. The problem is, and I'll show you this in a minute, is that being a T160, the exhaust pipes go directly over the top of that drain plug, and the only way, there's just no room at all to get it out past the exhaust. I'll show you in a minute. So the only other way to do it is to take the exhaust off, which kind of negates the whole point of having a plate with a plug on it. But because there's not much oil in the crankcase, then I just drain the oil from the primary, drain it from here, and that's good enough for me. Obviously there's some oil left in there, but not much. Obviously if you've got I've got an anti-drain valve fitted, so I know there's very little oil in the crankcase. If I had I didn't have a drain anti-drain valve, then what I do, I'd start the engine, run it for a bit and make sure that it pumped all the oil back out of the crankcase, and then drain it from the tank. Otherwise you've got loads sitting in the crankcase that's never gonna drain. Okay, I'm just going to get back to making sure that this doesn't overbalance. I'll show you the drain plug and that in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to try and show you why I can't take the drain plug off the sump plate. Now, a normal Trident, that sump plate doesn't have a drain plug in, so the only way of draining the sump is to take the exhaust off. It's on a T160, and take the plate off. Well, you have to do that anyway on a T150, but I'm saying the exhaust's not in the way. But on a T160, you've got these two extra central exhausts, and they go right over the sump plate. So now I do know people who've got this sump plate with this drain plug in, and the drain plug is like much more in the middle, and so you can get it out past the two pipes. But on mine, it's not. Now what you can't really see is that this pipe here, hold on, find my finger. Oh, my finger's gone. It's gone. Oh, blimey, there it is. What's my finger doing there? This pipe here is actually like about 1/16 of an inch below that plug. There's no wiggle room. You can't unscrew the plug and then get it out past the pipe, because the pipe is literally almost touching that drain plug. So, to be honest, even though I've got this plate with a drain plug in it, I don't bother. It's too much effort. I've got to take the exhaust off, and I don't bother. Because there's not much oil left in the sump, I know the oil's relatively fresh. Where am I? There I am. Hello. Oh dear, looking a bit rough. The oil's relatively fresh, so you know, okay, it's not perfect, but to be honest, that's what I do. I leave the oil that's left in the sump and change it. Oh, I'm a bad boy. Sometimes I'm a bad boy. Okay, so now I'm draining the oil from the primary chain case. I'm not draining it straight into my oil tank because with the stand down, I can't get it in the right place. So I'm just using an old paint tray, which I often do, and then I'll pour it into the tank from there. So the oil on a Trident, the oil in the primary chain case is shared with the crankcase. So you've got the main bearing behind here on the end of the crankshaft, there's no seal on it, so the oil can come from the crankcase into the primary chain case. So there's often a fair bit of oil in the primary chain case, but just be aware you drain the primary chain case, but when it drops below the level of the bearing, then the oil will stay. What's in the crankcase will then stay in the crankcase. There'll not be much, but just be aware of that. Anyway, so I'm just draining that down. Okay, so that's just about drained now. I'm not hung up on letting every single drop go. As long as I change your, I change your oil under every 1,000 miles anyway, so it's pretty fresh oil. So I'm not too worried about draining every last drop. I'll let it drip a bit more. We'll put the, I'll re-anneal this washer here by heating it up and then to cherry red, so it's nice and soft. And then might be able to see here, I'll put some thread lock on it as well, just as a double insurance, to make sure the oil doesn't seep past the plug. And then we'll put the plug back in again. Okay, just going to quickly heat this up to cherry red. Won't take long. There she goes. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm going to quench it in water. Now, I'm not sure whether to quench it or not. Some people say quench and some people don't. I quench because it's more fun. Simple as that. Get that. Oh, it's good fun. Right. Then I'll put it back on. We'll put some thread lock on and then pop it back in. That's the front of the crankcase, and if you look carefully, you can see that patch just welded here, and that I'm fairly sure is where the conrod, the centre conrod I think it would have been, exited out of the crankcase. But I think not only did it punch a hole in the crankcase, but obviously the crankshaft was still spinning, so it punched a hole and then span round and made a big mess of the back of the crankcase, including damaging the tunnel that the oil filter sits in. And that means the oil filter tunnel is not perfectly round, and that means that the oil filters tend to jam, especially pulling them out. And I kind of live in fear a bit of not being able to get the oil filters out, because you can push them in, they'll go in, because you're pushing from this side, but I worry that trying to pull them out, they're not going to come out. Okay, so we're going to look at the oil filters now, and this is an oil filter I've got that I've never used, because there should be this tang on the end which you use to pull the oil filter out, once it's to change it, to get rid of the old one, and of course, and the tang should be soldered on there, and it's missing, so I can't use that one, because as I was saying, on my bike the tunnel is damaged where the oil filter fits, and so it's a very tight fit, and so you know, there's no way, if I put that one in, I won't be able to get it back out again. So now one of these is an MGO, and I think it's this one, an MGO oil filter. Now, if you notice, the first thing I notice is the holes are bigger, allowing more oil to come out. The second thing to notice is that the hole in the end, see the one on the right is a larger diameter than the one on the left. Okay, so I'd always use this filter, but the only filter I've got in at the moment is that one, so I'm going to use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge that hole, which is where the oil comes in from the oil pump. So I want that nice and large to let the oil come in without any problems. Now, and this has got smaller holes, which I think is going to be okay. Obviously, if I didn't think it was okay, I wouldn't use it. But in preference, I would always use this one with the bigger holes if I had the choice. But with that missing end, I'm not going to. Right, so we'll see how we get on. The first thing I've got to do is to actually get the old oil filter out, and hopefully these aren't soldered on very well. None of them are. And I always worry that I'm going to grab and pull them, and then this tang is just going to fall off, as it has done with that one. And I'm going to be left with a oil filter jammed in my crankcases, which won't be great. We'll see how we get on. Okay, so we're going to try and change the oil filter now. I've got my drip trailer, as you can see that, because there's going to be some oil coming out. We've got a 15/16 socket, as beloved by Triumph, which fits that this cap. Now, just while I remember, this cap, the threads are known to go on this. So if you're in any doubt whatsoever, change that cap, because obviously the last thing you want is for this cap to come loose and even fall out when you're going to completely lose all your oil, but above all your oil pressure. So if there's any doubt about this cap, change it, because the threads are known to be weak, and they, with people constantly servicing it over the years, they wear out. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see and get this off. There she comes. So hopefully we haven't got too much oil, but we're going to have some at very least. What you can see here, but hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on. Right. So that's the cap off, which is spring loaded to hold, and that holds the oil filter nice and tight. Right, then we've got the tang for the old oil filter, and this is where my heart's in my mouth slightly. I'm going to try and pull it out. Oh damn, it doesn't want to move at all at the moment. Ah, there it goes. Phew. Right, now I know that it's now hitting the ridge in the middle of the sump where the welding was. Good. Ooh, right. Okay, that's the old oil filter out. Let's whack the new one in. Tang outwards. Interesting, I think on one of the parts list, is it, or the workshop manual, you see that's really tight. That doesn't want to go. Oh damn! I might have to change this. I'll have to see if I can crush this end, which I think I did on this, make it slightly oval, so that it goes past the damaged center of that what's it called, tunnel. There. I just squished it a bit. Now, what was I saying? I think I was trying to say before I was distracted, it in one of the manuals or parts catalogues, it actually shows this filter being fitted backwards with the tang facing inwards. It certainly doesn't. That tang fits over the spring here. Okay, and then you use the tang for pulling it out afterwards. I've got a new cap on mine, so I know that the threads are pretty okay. Probably have to get in the way now, because I need to try and get. I'll have to move the camera so I can see what I'm doing. You probably can't see a thing now, but there we go. I've managed to get it to bite again. There's also an O-ring, by the way, on that on this cap. So again, check that O-ring's okay, otherwise it will leak. Good. And there we go, all done. One thing I forgot to mention is, of course, I did enlarge the hole at the far end of the filter to make sure the oil goes through. Oh, just while we're here, you might notice that on that's my newfangled neutral indicator switch from what's it called? It's a place in Greece, Triples Unlimited. It's a proximity neutral sensor, so that means that it never actually touches the as it goes round. It can sense where neutral is by being the sensor is near to the cam plate rather than touching it. And it gives 100% neutral indication. I'll just show you now. So I'll turn I'll just quickly turn my, it gives me a nice clear neutral, never misses. And I'll just show you, I'll just turn this light off a minute. There we go. I'll just show you that, as if by magic, it illuminates down here as well. Look at that, hey? Smart or what? But it's expensive. It's about 180, 190 quid, I think, and a bit of a beggar to fit, but it is fantastic. I always get 100% 100% neutral, and then I've got this flashing warning light here, which is combined ignition and oil pressure. I'll explain that a bit later on. It tells me if I've got if the battery's not charging, and it tells me if I've got low oil pressure, but I'll go through that on another video. And just to mention, unscrewing these inspection caps, one thing that's good are the Hagon shock adjusters. They're just the right, for a lot of these, they're just the right thickness to do those. Of course, the other thing I've mentioned before is just this little gizmo that I think you can buy from various Triumph suppliers, and that's great. It goes in and then you put a spanner on it, and that saves you grunging up these, they get chewed up so easily, those the jaws there. Right, just on oil, I use Morris Lubricants Golden Film 2050. I'm not saying it's the best, it's just one I've always used. It's designed for classic, older bikes. It's got the right additives and so on for older engines, and works well for me, so that's the one I always use. Not saying it's the best or whatever, but that's the one I use. I'm going to fill the oil tank full of oil, and having done that, don't forget to do that first. Make sure all the drain plugs are back in. This may sound silly, but a number of times we've done that. Make sure all the drain plugs are back in, then fill it full of oil, probably up to near the full level. Then we'll turn the engine over to make sure we've got oil pressure, and we'll keep turning it over until we have oil return flow into the tank, by which time the oil will have dropped in the tank, because obviously it's got to fill up all the voids in the engine and all the oil pipes and that. And then we can top the oil back up to the level on the dipstick. Just by the by, this may sound obvious, but never, when I have an anti-wet sump valve fit to my bike, again, it's in there, which means that the oil can't drain into the crankcase when the bike's standing. But if you haven't got one of those, the oil can drain very quickly from the tank into the crankcase. So what you don't do is check your oil with the engine cold. Oh, crikey, it's low, and then fill it up, because the oil's gone into the crankcase. When you start the engine, it will pump it all back into the oil tank, and you'll have a massive oil overflow. So if you don't have an anti-wet sump, an anti-drain valve, then only ever check your oil when the engine's warm, and so that you're getting the correct reading. Because when it's cold, even after a couple of days, it's amazing how the bike can wet sump and how low the oil can be in the tank. So only ever check it when it's warm. Right, we're going to chug the engine over a couple of times and just check we've got oil pressure and got good return into the oil tank. Okay, we've filled the tank with oil and checked everything. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to chug the engine over without starting it to begin with, just on the starter. If I had been rebuilding the engine, if it was a fresh rebuild, I would have the plugs out and I would just chug it over on the starter until I got oil pressure. But because we're simply changing the oil, that I know there's oil in the system and I'm fairly sure everything's working okay, I'm going to chug it over with the plugs still in. You chug it over with the plugs out, A, for the starter, but B, so there's no stress on the big ends until you get oil pressure. But I know we've got oil in the big end, so I'm fairly sure we've got oil pressure straight away. But rather than start it sort of halfway house, I'm going to chug it over, but without starting. So I'm going to turn my emergency off, emergency kill switch. I'm just going to chug it over and I'll see if I get oil pressure as we are. Yeah, oil pressure and oil returning into the tank. Good. Yeah, I think we're fine. Yeah. Sorry. Well, I need to open the garage door, don't I? Blimey, before I die. Good. Right. So what I need to do now is I need to run it a bit more. Well, we got oil return, so we should be okay. But I might just run it a little bit more and then top the oil up because it will have gone down, to feed, to fill up all the voids and so on. I might run it a bit more and then top the oil up when it's all, made sure it's all in the primary and in the oil pipes and oil cooler and so on. Okay, but there we go, oil changed, and so we're all about done in that respect. And then there's other things I've got to now do as part of the service. But the oil's changed, new filter, new oil, happy.